Hello, everybody. Good evening, and welcome to the Grand Boulevard Coalition Show. My name is Cynthia Alvarez, and I'm the host today. I do not have a guest today, but I hope to have one in the next show that I will be having towards the end of June. So please be on the lookout for that. But yeah, plan for more guests hopefully during this summer. Before we get into the topic for today, I'm just going to quickly announce a youth talk that we have coming up, and we'll be showing that flyer with some more information. Since this month is Pride Month, we're going to have some discussions revolving LGBTQ youth, and that's what our youth talk is going to be focusing on today. But yeah, if we're able to show that on screen, you will be able to scan the QR code. If anything, too, we will also be posting our flyers on social media, on Facebook, Healthy Living CAP, and on our Instagram as well. So be on the lookout for that. But yeah, so here's our flyer. So it has the details. It won't be this Saturday. We had to reschedule it for the following Saturday, and it'll be from 1 to 2 over Zoom. So if you are able to scan that QR code, or like I said, follow us on our social medias, you'll be able to find that information on there as well. And we will also be giving away a gift card for youth who participate and raffling that off for them. But yeah, so that's what's going to be happening next Saturday. So just to be aware, we did change the date, not this Saturday though. So just be on the lookout for that and more information that we'll be posting on our social medias. We have a couple other events coming up towards the end of the month. We will also be having a workshop on working with LGBTQ populations. If you are in prevention or any other coalition just that works with LGBTQ youth or adults as well. It's a workshop that's going to be hosted by our program, Healthy Living, our number one goal. And we'll also be posting information on that on our social medias as well. So be on the lookout for that. But yeah, as I mentioned, June is Pride Month, and we wanted to just talk about the topic for today, which will be LGBTQ stigmas that they face and that they experience, and also just how to best support them. No matter where you are, who you are, you're able to support LGBTQ youth and adults in any way. And we're going to be talking about that for today. But yeah, so before we get into that, we're going to specifically go over the definition of stigma, right? So what is stigma? What does that mean? How is it harmful? The definition of stigma, a social stigma to be specific, is the disapproval or discrimination against an individual or a group based on perceived characteristics that serve to distinguish them from other members of society. So kind of finding things that are different, quote unquote, about certain populations and kind of making them to appear less than the norm or status quo, if that makes sense for some people. So basically just kind of pointing things out that will ostracize others, make them feel other, and kind of keep them away from the normal, quote unquote normal, right, of society, which is heterosexuals or people who identify as straight, which is the norm, which was kind of societal, decided by society. And that's something that we're kind of going to go into a little bit, right? So much of this status quo and what the norm is basically things that have been established by people in power, right? So people with money, people of high status, and even lawmakers, right? People who work in politics, who will create laws that can be potentially harmful to specific populations. And those laws are often created due to individual lawmakers or higher positions who believe in certain things, right? And that can often root from religion. And it can just often root from people's personal opinions, people's personal grievances or personal dislikes with certain communities, certain populations. They will create laws that are kind of out to harm other populations that do not identify the same way as they do, right? So that is something that is often seen, by higher powers, like I said. So it's lawmakers, people in high paying positions, just people very, very much up there who kind of establish their opinions, are very public about their opinions. And if those people in high powers have followers and people who like that person in power, they tend to also believe the same things that they believe. So that's kind of how status quos and things like that get established and created in our society, and in other societies as well. So in 2022 alone, a lot of the data also that I'm going to be sharing has been found through the Human Rights Campaign, or HRC, and you can find a lot of this information on their website as well. So according to them, in 2022, state lawmakers introduced more than 300 bills that were targeting the rights of LGBTQI plus people, especially youth and transgender people. And that was just in that 1 year. So just to kind of emphasize that, in 1 year they made 300 plus laws that were targeting this specific population. And of course, it hasn't stopped since 2022. It's still a thing that's happening, still kind of going on right now. And people are, of course, protesting these things. So that's kind of something just to be aware of, something that's currently happening. And so why is this harmful, right? Why are these laws harmful? A lot of them haven't gone through. A lot of them are just kind of laws that people put up before, they have been enacted and that have not been enacted yet, but still, right? Like the fact that these laws have been created, it's still harmful. And it's harmful because these laws specifically target and impact things like health care, mental health care as well. It impacts youth who are going to schools, laws related to youth protections and adult protections as well, against like things such as discrimination, hate crimes, and things like that. And just people's freedom of expression, right? Freedom of expression, freedom of speech is kind of hit on a little bit with these kinds of laws that prohibit, for example, things such as drag shows from going on in certain states. They want to ban that, or they want to limit that, which is kind of going against freedom of expression, right? So those kinds of things are very harmful to these communities just because it kind of limits their rights, and rights that heterosexuals have, right? So heterosexuals have right to healthcare and right to mental health resources, whereas for LGBTQ populations, that might be harder for them to come by, harder for them to get insurance for those kinds of things. So it'll be more expensive and more costly for them to get these kinds of this kind of care and attention that they need as well. So yeah, that's kind of a little bit of that. And so this all comes from the belief that they are less deserving of the same rights, right, given to the quote-unquote normal people who are heterosexual, right, which is kind of labeled as the norm. And so consequently, this can also influence people's behaviors, leading to discrimination, like I said, and hate crimes and LGBTQ-related violence cases, right? So with these laws, with these people in power who are very open about their beliefs about how they are against certain lifestyles, they tend to influence their followers and people who support them, which can then turn people to behave a certain way with these populations, which can lead to people getting hurt, and hate crimes, discrimination, things like bullying, because people are getting picked on for being a part of the LGBTQ community, and workplace violence, workplace discrimination as well, right? So it's not just happening, bullying doesn't just happen to youth, it also happens to the adults as well, and just in different environments. And so the FBI from 2022 crime report shows LGBTQ hate crimes were up 13.8% from the previous year. And more than 1 in 5 hate crimes were related to LGBTQ bias, especially transgender and Black trans women were the most affected population from this group. So that kind of tends to show you that not only do LGBTQ people, they're more highly affected by these things, but also LGBTQ people of color, right? Which is already a whole other group that has had to deal with stigma. Besides, if they're just from people looking at the color of someone's skin, right? So when they find out also that they tend to be part of the LGBTQ community, then certain people feel entitled to act a certain way around these people and feel more freely to do so, right? Because of the lack of discrimination laws against this specific population, right? So there's not going to be any legal repercussions for these people to act this way, which makes them feel like it's okay to act that way. So yeah, that's something that's very important to keep note of, and especially with bullying, right? So there's been a lot of cases on the news, specifically with younger kids, youth in high school, youth in 8th grade or middle school aged kids who have experienced severe bullying because of their sexual orientation or their identities and who they are. And if they identify with the LGBTQ population, they tend to be bullied more often, which has led to a lot of, higher rates of suicide. There have been studies that show that suicide is one of the second leading causes of death within youth. So that is information that you can find from doing research. I'm not exactly sure on the age range, but they said specifically with youth, it's the second leading cause of death. Excuse me. The second leading cause of death. So that's something that's very alarming, right? And that's not specific to LGBTQ youth, just youth in general. But if you can imagine LGBTQ youth specifically, they're more highly affected and more highly at risk for suicide because they have lack of support. They're being bullied at school. Their teachers don't support them. They don't have maybe the best home life where maybe they're not out to their parents yet, or they are and their parents aren't accepting of them. So they feel like there's no way out and they feel like they're not being supported. And that's something that can lead to things like suicide, things like depression, anxiety, and mental health issues. So those are just a couple things to keep in mind as well. And in terms of adults who identify in this community too, they are also, like I mentioned, more likely to experience workplace harassment, workplace bullying, the feeling of being ostracized because maybe your coworkers don't accept you for who you are, they are judgmental, and the boss or higher-ups in your company or at your job are not accepting either, so it kind of creates a toxic work environment for you, right? So that is also another thing. And like I said, the discrimination that happens, it goes unchecked by the law and people can get away with that kind of thing. So it's harder for people who are in this population to want to seek help from the law. They don't trust the law. They don't feel that they're being supported by the law, by police, because there's no laws really, or not many laws that protect them and their rights. So yeah, also other harmful things that come from stigma and from people who have specific maybe religious beliefs. There are things that have come from that, such as conversion therapy. And what conversion therapy is, not to get into the very specifics, but the idea of conversion therapy is to basically, they think it's something that's going to quote unquote heal you and eliminate those desires that you have for people of your same gender, of your same identity, and it's supposed to heal you and it's supposed to make you stay away from those urges, and that's kind of what they believe. And studies have actually shown that conversion therapy is actually more harmful to those who take part in it. Often it's youth who are taking part in conversion therapy because their parents are forcing their child to go through with it. And so youth can actually become traumatized from these kinds of things. It'll further suppress their feelings and, of course, lead to more mental health problems and higher risk for suicide, right? Because those people will really feel like, what they believe in and what they feel they are in their identity is not accepted, is not okay. Their parents believe that it's wrong to feel the way that they feel. Society feels like it's wrong for them to feel that way and be who they are. So it's actually more harmful. And HRC, Human Rights Campaign, also talks about that as well as the Trevor Project. There's a lot of studies that they kind of have shown to talk about the harms of conversion therapy. And that is something that is based on religious beliefs. So that's something just to be aware of too. It doesn't happen as often as it used to, but it still does happen. So it's something that's important to be aware of. And because of this, LGBTQ populations will tend to avoid certain places where they feel like they're not accepted, right? And it'll be kind of, like I mentioned earlier, it'll be a little more, no, not a little more difficult, but a lot more difficult for them to seek the care, the help, and the resources that they need, right? If we are very blessed to live in a state like Illinois and live in a city like Chicago where there are many resources for LGBTQ populations, and where the state and this city specifically is more accepting of LGBTQ populations, but not all LGBTQ people live in such accepting places, right? So there are in those Republican states or other states where, even if it's not based on Republican or Democrats, even based on just people's religious beliefs, like I said, if people tend to live in those areas, there's going to be less resources for them there. There's going to be more laws that are infringing on their rights, more laws that kind of go against the healthcare that they need. So people who need gender-affirming care, for example, or people who are transitioning, for those who identify as transgender and are trying to transition effectively, they need specific care that will help them with that transition, right? And sometimes health insurance will not really see that as a need, and that'll make these procedures and the healthcare more expensive, which makes it less accessible to people that really need it. These are people that want this kind of care because it should be a right. Healthcare in general should be a right, but because they don't have the specific care that they need and because it's more expensive, they will tend to not get it. They'll tend to avoid going to the doctor as a whole because they feel like they're not going to get the care that they need. They're not going to seek therapy services because there's either lack of resources or it's really expensive and they can't afford it. And even places maybe where, let's say if there's people going to a protest for LGBTQ rights, they may tend to avoid protests or avoid places with high police activity because they may be targeted just for the way that they look, or if they are identified by police, they might target them specifically. So avoiding certain places just because they feel like they have a feeling that they're going to be discriminated against. And even certain shops, even certain stores that make their beliefs very known if they are against LGBTQ populations. There was a very popular case that happened, I think before COVID or during COVID. It was a case that got national news where a couple was denied wedding cake services it was some type of service where they were trying to get married. It was a same-sex couple, and they were denied service by a specific vendor because of their sexuality. They were denied a cake being made because of that. And that's something to look into too. I don't remember the exact details, but I just remember that was something that made news because it was discrimination. They denied them service because of who they are. So even avoiding places where they feel like they're not going to be welcome, they're just going to stay away from them. And that also becomes harmful to them and living the best quality of life that they can live, right? And Yeah, so they might even change the way that they dress. They'll avoid being the authentic self that they want to be. That, let's say, for example, it's a young woman who wants to cut her hair and have short hair, but the parent doesn't want her child to have short hair because they feel like it's going to make them look like a boy. Or they're just like, oh, what will your family think? What will they say about you if you look a certain way? So they're kind of pushed by their parents or other people to look a certain way, right? Just to avoid the criticism and avoid things like that, which is harmful. So what are some ways that we can help them, right? Help them as a community, help them as people who work in prevention, who work in organizations that work with this population. And even if you're just a regular person who has friends that are part of this community, there are different ways that we can help. We can help with advocating for their rights, right? So if those who are afraid to go to protests because they feel like they're going to be targeted, we can go for them. We can go and support them, even if it's not physically, maybe through petitions and signing petitions, speaking with our aldermen, speaking with our legislators and the people that are representing our state and supporting laws that support these populations, right? And as well as just being someone who is non-judgmental and accepting of their friends, their family who may entrust them with this information because they might not be out to everybody, but they chose to share it with you, right? Because they want that support from you. And so offering that support to them, trying to just be accepting of who they are, right? So using non-stigmatizing language, saying words or phrases that might make them feel isolated, trying to avoid words like that, and instead just telling them how proud of them you are, reminding them that we support them, that we're here for them no matter what, right? Like as a friend, you're going to be there for your friend no matter what. And that's not going to change regardless of their sexual orientation or their identity, right? Because they're still the person that you know, that you care about. It's what's inside that matters, right? So if you know who they are as a person, being who they are on the outside doesn't change that. And just kind of being aware of that, especially working with parents. If you're someone who works in the communities and you work with youth who identify in this community, it's also important to work with the parents and kind of include them in any activities where they can start to build healthy communications with their child. If their child starts to maybe just start to be curious about their identity, right? Kids are very curious, kids are very open to learning about themselves. They're still learning about the world and who they are as a person. So if they start to question who they are and their sexual identities or just their identity, it's just important to be there for your child and make sure that the parent is not causing any harm to that child's self-worth and self-identity by just teaching them healthy communication skills and even going to therapy as a family. Family therapy is an option as well. Having a therapist help navigate that is something that can help too. But yeah, there's lots of different ways that we can help. Being there, even as a community worker, also learning about stigmatizing language and taking trainings that help you work with this population is very important too, especially if you don't know too much about this population. It's just important to be aware and just to learn how to best support everybody and marginalized people as well. So yeah, that's basically all the information I wanted to share today. I hope you all were able to learn a little something. Like I said, my next show will be towards the end of June, hopefully with a guest. And I hope you all have a safe Pride Month. Take care. Have a good rest of your week. And thank you.